Hi, my name is Babak Siddiqzadeh. I'll be your host today, and with me is performance coach Katie Pervell, and today we'll be talking about team performance. So first of all, can we break down what constitutes the dynamic of a team?
The dynamic of a team, what makes a team?
Exactly, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of sports, which is what we're talking about, there are so many different kinds of teams. I mean, it can be a football team. You're a football player,
Yeah.
you know, that is clearly there's a team of people that all play important positions that come together as it's a big puzzle and make it work. Or it could be a pair in figure skating. It could be a pair team in figure skating. It could be in an equestrian event. It could be a rider or many riders and a horse. So a team can take a lot of different forms, as opposed to an individual sport, which is clearly one person on their own path in their own sport.
And ultimately, I think it's really important that regardless of a team being an individual sport or not, there's always the relationship between the players and the coach.
Absolutely.
And whether it be a big team or a one-man team, there's always that relationship between a coach trying to establish his philosophy and a
Right.
player trying to manifest it to the best of his ability.
Absolutely.
So what are some things that, categories that categorize team building and team performance?
Right. Well, I would say there are several of them, several key points that we can look at. I mean, first area would be just psychology, the psychology of performance and how that plays out, so to speak, between coach and players, among players, between two people within a team, if it's a pair, and even animal to human is an interesting concept as well. And the next area would be communication. Communication, how you speak to each other, and even how you speak to yourself as an athlete. How you think and how you speak about yourself are also important aspects of communication, and therefore team performance. And I would say a third one would be a plan or a strategy that although in individual sports a plan is also important, we have a performance that we have prepared and there's usually a plan behind it. However, in a team performance there is an element of the plan being a little different. It's broader and it involves more people, therefore it can sometimes need to change on the spot. And I would say the final element is the training.
Probably.
Yeah, that's. I think we're thinking on the same lines there, though. Is the actual skills that you learn, the training that's involved, the physical aspect of the training as well as the mental training, and as we know, mind and body work together to create peak performance.
So with regards to psychology, there's obviously going to be positive psychology employed,
Right.
and a lot of different. If we're looking at psychology from the coaching
Right.
aspect, and then also the individual aspect, there's the
Right.
coach who has a philosophy, and then there's the players that have to carry out this philosophy, so they have to have the confidence to do it. So can we talk about what are some types of psychology that teams can administer to improve their performance from the coach's perspective and from the player's perspective?
From the player's perspective. Well, you raise an interesting point about a coach having a philosophy that he or she wants to really infiltrate and implement and use within a team environment. And of course, that would be particularly true in football, your sport, or basketball. And I also really believe that even though a coach will have that particular philosophy, that it's really important for each player to know what their own philosophy is too. I'm really big on individual personal responsibility, because ultimately when you're out there on the field or on the floor, you're the one that's got to perform. You're the one that has to step up, show up, and be a productive member of the team, right?
Sure.
And also you have to have the awareness to be able to support the coach in that philosophy as well. It all has to play together. It's that puzzle. It's that puzzle, right?
Definitely. And then, so our next point that we can bring up is communication. And
Right.
obviously, in a team, communication is going to play a huge role.
Right.
Because players have to be able to communicate amongst themselves.
Right.
The coach has to be able to communicate with the players. And the players have to be able to communicate with the coach, which is sometimes the most difficult thing to do, because you don't want to upset your coach.
Right.
You want to have a positive reputation. And furthermore, sometimes you may not have that relationship with your coach where you feel comfortable talking to him about certain things.
Right.
So can we go deeper into how important is communication? What are some different strategies to improve communication? What are some things we use to employ communication in a team and in an individual level?
Right. That's a wonderful question, and it's a rich one. There's a lot to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the piece you said about an individual communicating with a coach, that, of course, takes many forms, whether it's an individual sport or whether it's an individual as part of a team communicating with the coach. And any kind of communication in team performance comes down to relationship building. You are building and maintaining a relationship, and you are responsible, the coach and the athlete, for the integrity of it. And in something like an athletic environment, integrity is key. So what is integrity? Integrity is being willing to say what's true for you. It's treating the other person with respect. And one key point that I make to my clients as well that I find really helpful is when you're engaging in a conversation with someone where you might anticipate there could potentially be conflict or you may have a different opinion, it's really, really powerful to start by saying, I understand your perspective. To get into that person's experience, you start by acknowledging what's true for them. And that gets them on board. And then you have sort of a more level playing field, that it's not a point of contention, but you start with what's the same. You start with where you agree. And that's one really, a really good communication skill that I think is important. And I mean, I coached figure skating for over 25 years, and I still do that sometimes. And I think it's really, really important for the coach to know that he or she needs to respect that the player may have a different opinion, and that ultimately, as coaches, we are really encouraging our athletes, most of whom are younger, to be whole individuals, whole people. And so, hey, it's great if they have a different opinion because they're having individuated thinking, right? They're thinking on their own. They're having a different opinion. They're learning. They're growing. And a sport should be that bigger picture of your life and something that you can learn from and grow from and become a better person in the sense of having a stronger foundation of who you are and what you believe in, right?
Yeah. And another thing that I think is really important for a coach to communicate is coaches have to have the ability to communicate to everybody on the team, and they have to be able to communicate to them that their purpose.
Right.
Because if players don't feel a purpose, because not every player on bigger teams, on football teams, basketball teams, and some other athletic events, not always players get to play.
Right,
and they see the field.
exactly.
They go to practice, they train, they do all this work, and for what? So a coach's job is to communicate the purpose to every player and help them realize that as a team, everybody on the team has a purpose.
Right.
And that way you get less people dropping out. You get more motivated players, and you get people that don't play, but they're still there because they know that they're building a team.
Right.
You know, it's more than just a 5-man team. You know.
So the coach is really responsible. What you're saying is the coach is really responsible to always keep that bigger picture in mind, the greater good. There is that element of the greater good of the whole team that comes into play so much more than an individual sport.
And then how do players, such as in a horse vaulting event, you know, how do they communicate with each other in the midst of the competition when they can't openly talk about something? What's one way they can communicate with each other? There's other forms of communication, you know, body language versus always, you know, using verbal and physical, you know.
Absolutely. So yes, it's interesting you bring up horse vaulting. We were talking before the show about how many of the horse vaulters I work with, the individual vaulters, where they are doing gymnastics on horseback while the horse is cantering in a circle. It's a very unusual sport and brings in so many components of performance and team performance. And there is one event in horse vaulting where there are many vaulters on the horse at the same time in varying positions and holding each other. So I would say one of the biggest things to establish, I'm big for establishing the foundation baseline and then working from that. One of the biggest things to establish is trust. Trust among all the team members, and clearly in something that's potentially dangerous,